Hello, my name is Eva. I wasn't born in the United States, but now I live here. And I want to tell you about my journey, how I made English part of my everyday life. I didn't grow up speaking it. And at first, I struggled a lot. But once I stopped thinking of English as a subject and started treating it like a lifestyle, everything changed. When I first moved to the United States, I thought I needed to find a classroom or take an expensive English course to truly learn the language. That's what everyone back home told me, that I had to sit in a room, memorize vocabulary lists, pass grammar tests, and study hard if I wanted to speak like an American. But the truth is, none of that really worked for me. I had taken classes before. I passed written exams, answered multiple choice questions, and even filled out those grammar worksheets that ask you to circle the correct verb tense. But when it came to real life, talking to people at the grocery store, answering a cashier's question, or trying to follow a conversation at work, I froze. My heart raced, my mouth dried up, and my mind went completely blank. It was like all the words I had memorized disappeared the second I needed them. I felt helpless, and more than that, I felt small. One night, I was lying on my bed, scrolling through my phone like I always did. My apps were still in my native language. Every button, every notification, every setting was familiar and safe. But then I had this random thought. If I live in an English-speaking country, why am I still hiding behind my old language? That one question hit me harder than any lesson ever had. I realized I wasn't really giving English a chance to be part of my life. I was still treating it like something outside of me, something separate. So I did something small, but it changed everything. I opened my phone settings and switched the entire system to English. It felt strange at first. Words like Bluetooth, display, general, do not disturb, and battery health popped up everywhere. I didn't always know what they meant, but instead of switching back, I stuck with it. I looked up the words I didn't know. I explored each setting like it was part of a game. Soon, I could move through my phone without thinking twice. I wasn't studying flashcards. I was just using my phone, like anyone else. And that was the point. English stopped being something I studied and started becoming something I used. After that, I couldn't stop. I began changing more things. First my phone, then my music. I had always loved listening to music, but it was always in my native language. It made me feel connected to home, to my memories, to who I had been. But now I wanted to feel connected to where I was going. So I opened Spotify and started exploring American playlists. I searched for Top 100 USA and played the first song. It was upbeat, full of slang and fast lyrics, and I didn't understand half of it. Still, I kept listening. I listened while I walked to work. I listened while I folded laundry. I listened in the car, in the kitchen, and even in the shower. At first, it was like hearing a different language. Not just the words, but the rhythm, the emotion, the cultural expressions. But the more I listened, the more my ears adapted. I started catching phrases, repeating choruses, even Googling lyrics late at night just to figure out what a line meant. One line from a country song made me cry because it reminded me of home. Another line from a pop song made me laugh because I had been saying the phrase wrong for months. I didn't just hear the words, I felt them. And slowly, I began to speak them too. The songs helped me understand how Americans express love, sadness, frustration, joy, all through simple, everyday words. And music didn't judge me. It didn't care if I had an accent. I could sing along without anyone correcting me. It was freedom. It was fun. It was English, alive and full of feeling. The next step was my online world. I realized that I was still following creators and influencers from my country, people who spoke my native language and lived completely different lives from mine. So I made another change. I unfollowed almost all of them and searched for Americans. Not celebrities, just normal people. College students, young moms, entrepreneurs, fitness coaches, book lovers, and small-town vloggers. I wanted to see how they lived, what they ate, how they talked, how they laughed, what slang they used, and how they expressed themselves in their daily lives. I found a girl from Texas who made videos about her family meals. I learned what cornbread was. I watched a college student from California walk through her campus while sipping iced coffee and complaining about midterms. I didn't know what midterms were, so I looked it up. I followed a woman in Ohio who shared tips on how to decorate a small apartment on a budget. She used phrases like on the cheap, DIY, and declutter. I kept a little notebook next to me to write new expressions I heard. But the most amazing thing, I didn't feel like I was studying. I felt like I was just part of something real. Social media gave me something that textbooks never could. Real American English in action. I wasn't reading dialogues in a fake restaurant setting. I was watching someone order takeout on a Friday night. I wasn't practicing formal greetings. I was hearing people say, "Hey, what's up?" or "How's it going?" I wasn't learning rules. I was learning life. And it was addicting. These small changes didn't seem like much in the beginning. But when you add them up, your phone, your music, your social feed, your environment, they become your new language classroom. But this classroom didn't have desks or homework. It had real voices, real feelings, and real people. And that made all the difference. One day while riding the bus, I looked out the window and realized something surprising. My thoughts weren't just in my native language anymore. They were in English too. Simple thoughts like, "I hope I'm not late," or "I need to pick up some milk," came in English first. I didn't have to translate. I didn't even try to. English was starting to live in my brain, not just as words, but as part of who I was becoming. Another time, I went to a local grocery store and asked the clerk where I could find almond butter. I didn't stutter. I didn't panic. I just said the words calmly and clearly. And the funny part, she answered me without blinking, just like I was any other person. That's when I knew I was making progress, not because someone gave me a good grade, but because I was finally being understood. The more English entered my daily life, the less scared I felt. I wasn't just memorizing words, I was living them. And the more I lived them, the more natural they felt. English didn't live in a classroom anymore. It lived in my kitchen, in my phone, in my playlists, and in my thoughts. But even with all those changes, there was one thing still missing: my voice. Yes, I was seeing, hearing, and reading English all the time, but I wasn't really speaking it, not out loud, not often, not to anyone, not even to myself. And I knew that had to change, because if I wanted to feel truly free in English, I had to open my mouth. I had to practice speaking even if no one was listening. And that's exactly what I did next. Even after I changed my phone to English, filled my playlists with American music, and surrounded my online world with people speaking the language I wanted so badly to master, I still felt something was missing. I was soaking in English through my eyes and ears, yes, but I wasn't letting it come out of my mouth. I realized I was still quiet. Too quiet. Not just around others, but even when I was alone. I had filled my environment with the language, but I hadn't yet invited English into the space where real change happens. My own voice. That realization came one morning as I was getting ready for work. I was brushing my teeth, and as usual, I was scrolling through Instagram stories while half awake. A girl I followed, someone from New York who shared daily life clips, posted a video where she said, "Don't wait for someone to practice English with. Talk to yourself. Be your own best partner." At first, I laughed. The idea of walking around my apartment talking to myself seemed silly, like something a little kid would do. But something about her confidence made me stop and think. Why not? Why was I waiting for the perfect conversation partner? Why was I depending on the world to give me a chance to speak when I had a voice of my own? That very same day, I decided to try it. Not a full conversation, not yet, but just a few words. I stood in front of the mirror and said, "Good morning, Ava." My voice felt strange in my ears. It didn't sound like me. Then I added, "Let's get ready." I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment, even though nobody else was in the room. I looked around, just to make sure. And then I laughed at myself, softly, but still. And just like that, the fear started to fade. Over the next few days, I made a rule. Whenever I was alone, I'd speak in English out loud. No pressure, no big grammar goals, just short, natural sentences, like I was talking to a friend. I'm so tired today. I need to do laundry. Ugh, I forgot to buy bananas again. Simple, honest talk. I didn't worry about sounding smart. I just wanted to sound like me. And surprisingly, it felt nice. Talking out loud helped me hear my own voice in English. It gave my thoughts shape. It gave my feelings words. Little by little, I expanded the things I'd say. Instead of just making comments about my day, I started asking myself questions and answering them. What should I wear today? Maybe the blue jeans and that black hoodie? It's kind of chilly. I'd practice this routine in the morning while choosing clothes or getting my coffee ready. These were the kinds of thoughts I had anyway, but now I was simply saying them in English. At first it felt forced, but soon it became second nature. And something incredible started to happen. I stopped translating in my head. I used to build every sentence in my native language and then try to convert it into English before I said it. That delay made me slow, unsure, and nervous. But once I started talking to myself every day, directly in English, without planning or preparing, I noticed I was thinking more freely. The sentences came faster. The words fit more naturally. Even my mistakes didn't bother me as much. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was trying to be real. And I was being kind to myself, just like a good friend would be. One evening, while I was washing dishes, I found myself talking about my day, out loud, like I was chatting with someone next to me. Today was crazy. That lady at the store was so rude, and I almost forgot to clock out at work. I need to get better at that. I paused for a second and smiled. I was storytelling in English to myself. That was new, and it felt like a small kind of freedom. Talking to myself gave me more than language practice. It gave me courage. It gave me emotional space to make English feel like mine. And soon, I started using this practice to talk through feelings that were hard to say out loud to anyone else. When I was upset, I'd say, "I feel overwhelmed, everything's too much right now." When I was happy, I'd say, "This coffee tastes amazing. I needed this so bad." It sounds simple, but speaking your truth, even in a new language, makes a deep impact. I started to trust myself more. My voice no longer felt foreign. It felt familiar. On weekends, I'd sometimes pretend I was giving a little vlog to an imaginary audience. I'd walk around my apartment, holding a hairbrush like a mic, and narrate my actions. "Okay, guys, I'm making breakfast. Eggs and toast today. Pretty basic, but I'm too lazy to cook anything fancy." I made jokes, gave fake cooking tips, even complained about doing laundry like I was talking to followers online. I wasn't trying to go viral. I was trying to make English feel playful. And honestly, it worked. I started laughing more. I stopped judging my accent. I felt free to be goofy, honest, expressive. English wasn't a test anymore. It was a part of my personality. Sometimes I'd do this while walking outside with earbuds in so I wouldn't look completely crazy. People thought I was on a call, but I was really just talking about the weather, the birds, or the weird bumper stickers I saw. I'd say things like, "That guy just ran a red light. What is wrong with people today?" Or, "These clouds look like rain, but I hope it holds off until I get home." These little one-person conversations helped me practice speaking in public without the fear of being corrected or judged. And because I kept it casual, it didn't feel like homework. It felt like something I owned. After a few months of doing this every day, something shifted inside me. My brain started choosing English first, especially in emotional moments. When I spilled hot coffee on myself, I didn't curse in my native language. I shouted, "Oh my gosh!" When I was excited about a Friday night plan, I didn't think it in translation. I said, "Yes, I need this night out so bad." It wasn't forced. It was just who I was becoming. Talking to myself also made real conversations easier. Because I had already practiced words and phrases in private, they came out more naturally in public. At work, when my manager asked if I could stay late, I didn't freeze. I said, "Sure, I don't mind. Just let me send a quick text." At the dentist, when the assistant asked if I was okay, I smiled and said, "Yeah, just nervous." I hate this part. Those small, casual responses used to scare me, but now they flowed. Not because I memorized them, but because I had lived them in my own private world first. Eventually, I started recording myself, just on my phone. Nothing fancy. I'd pick a random topic and speak for 1 minute straight. No stopping, no correcting, just speaking. I'd say things like, "Okay, today I want to talk about my favorite meal. I love mac and cheese, but only the baked kind. I tried making it once from scratch, but it was a disaster. Still worth it though." I'd listen back to the recordings later, not to criticize myself, but to see my progress. I noticed when I sounded more confident, when my sentences came out smooth, and when I used words I had picked up from songs or videos. It became a little time capsule of my growth. And the most important part, I treated myself with kindness through it all. I didn't let that inner critic take over. If I made a mistake, I just kept going. I reminded myself, you're learning, you're growing, you're doing something brave. I talked to myself like I was a friend, supportive, gentle, and proud. That mindset changed everything. Because here's the truth, the way we speak to ourselves shapes how we show up in the world. If I had kept waiting for someone else to give me a chance to speak, I might still be silent. But once I gave myself that chance, once I said, you don't need to be perfect, just start, I opened a door that led to real confidence. Not the kind that comes from a test score or a compliment, but the kind that comes from deep inside. And once I started using English to express how I felt, to describe my day, to reflect on my thoughts, to tell silly stories, I began to realize that English was becoming part of my identity. It wasn't just the language I heard around me, it was becoming the language inside me. And the more I used it with myself, the more ready I felt to use it with others. But I didn't want to stop there. Now that I had found my voice, I wanted to bring English into the routines I lived by every day. I wanted to wake up with it, work with it, rest with it. I wanted it to be there in the background of my normal life. Because if English was going to truly become part of who I was, it had to move beyond my voice and into my daily rhythm. Once I got used to speaking to myself in English, something in me shifted. It wasn't just about saying words out loud anymore. It was about building a rhythm, a natural connection to the language. The more I spoke to myself like a friend, the more my thoughts began to form in English without me even trying. And once that door opened, I knew I wanted more. I didn't want English to be something I used only when I remembered. I wanted it to become automatic, like brushing my teeth, making coffee, or tying my shoes. I wanted English to be woven into my routines, not in a stressful, forced way, but in a way that felt real, comfortable, sustainable, a habit that would grow with me. I started by taking a close look at my day. What did I do every morning? What were the little patterns I repeated without thinking? I realized that I had dozens of chances each day to include English, without adding extra time, effort, or stress. So I started small, right when I woke up. Instead of checking my phone in silence or going straight to emails, I turned on a short English podcast while brushing my teeth. Nothing too long or technical, just daily updates, short motivational talks, or 5-minute stories. I liked ones with clear American accents and friendly voices. At first, I couldn't catch every word, especially when I was still half asleep. But I didn't let that stop me. I just listened. The sound of English in the background helped set the tone for my day. It made the language feel normal, like a part of my home. Then I added English to my breakfast routine. I used to sit in silence while sipping coffee or scrolling through social media. Now, I turned that time into a quiet lesson. I'd play a YouTube video, maybe a lifestyle vlogger talking about her weekend, or someone giving tips on time management. These weren't English lessons in the traditional sense. They were just videos in English by people who spoke like everyday Americans. I'd watch how they formed their sentences, how they used humor, how their tone changed depending on what they were saying. It wasn't just about words. It was about energy. It made English feel human. One habit I developed that really helped was shadowing. I didn't even know what it was called at first. I just did it. When I heard someone say a sentence in a video or podcast, I'd repeat it softly under my breath. Let's get started with today's episode. I'd mimic the tone, the rhythm, even the pause between words. I'd say it over and over while washing dishes or doing my makeup. I didn't care if I looked silly. It helped me internalize natural speech patterns. After a while, I didn't just understand what they were saying. I started sounding more like them, too. I also built English into my housework. Every Sunday, I cleaned my apartment, which used to feel boring and repetitive. But now, it became one of my favorite language days. I'd put on a playlist of American songs or stream an English audiobook while vacuuming or folding laundry. One time I listened to a comedy podcast while scrubbing the kitchen and laughed so hard I had to sit down. That moment felt important. I realized I wasn't studying English anymore. I was living in it. I was feeling joy in the language, and it was completely natural. Another simple trick that changed everything was labeling. I went around my apartment with sticky notes and wrote the names of things in English. Mirror, microwave, closet, drawer, shelf, faucet. It sounds childish, I know, but it worked. Every time I opened the fridge or used the remote, I saw those little notes. They made my surroundings speak to me. I stopped thinking of English as a thing I had to remember and started seeing it as part of my space. I also started journaling in English. Nothing long, just 5 minutes at night. I'd write about what happened that day, how I felt, or what I wanted to do tomorrow. I didn't worry about grammar. I didn't check spelling. I just wrote from the heart. Today was hard. I felt tired all day. I need to drink more water. Tomorrow I want to go for a walk and clear my head. Those were the kinds of sentences that helped me feel connected to myself. Writing them in English made me feel strong, like I was growing into a new version of me, someone who could feel deeply and express it clearly in another language. At work, I used to avoid writing emails in English unless I absolutely had to. But once I started using English in my routines, it felt easier to handle formal writing. I began keeping templates for common replies, short, polite, American-style emails like, "Thanks for reaching out," or "Let me know if you need anything else." I practiced writing them during breaks so that when I needed them in real life, they were ready. Over time, those workplace phrases became second nature. Even grocery shopping became part of my routine learning. Before going to the store, I'd write my shopping list in English: spinach, chicken thighs, toothpaste, almond milk. At the store, I made a point of reading every product label out loud to myself. Quietly, of course. I'd say, "Okay, that's low-fat yogurt. That one says no added sugar. This says organic bananas." I wasn't just shopping. I was building vocabulary. And because I tied the new words to real items, they stuck in my brain longer. Cooking gave me another chance to blend language with routine. I started watching recipe videos by American home cooks. I'd watch and cook along, repeating their steps. Now whisk the eggs. Add a pinch of salt. Let it simmer for 10 minutes. I wasn't just making dinner. I was learning real useful English. And bonus, I ate better too. Even my relaxation time became part of my English environment. When I was tired, I used to reach for comfort shows in my native language. But now I started watching American sitcoms and dramas. I started with subtitles on, but slowly turned them off as my listening improved. I'd rewind scenes I liked and repeat lines. One night, I watched an old episode of Friends, and I repeated Chandler's joke until I got the timing just right. I didn't just want to understand the words. I wanted to feel how they were said. On some nights, when my brain was too tired for serious learning, I just watch TikTok videos or Instagram reels from American creators. Short bursts of language, slang, and humor kept my mind connected to the real way people speak. I'd copy lines I liked and practice them in front of the mirror. "No way, that's wild!" Or, "You've gotta be kidding me." It was like I was collecting little pieces of the culture and keeping them in my pocket. Making English part of my routines didn't feel like a big change. It felt like a series of tiny decisions. Replacing silence with a podcast, replacing native subtitles with English ones, choosing an English recipe instead of one from home, asking myself questions out loud while getting dressed. But those tiny changes added up, and because they were tied to things I already did every day, they didn't feel like work. They felt like me. Over time, I started to notice something else. English was no longer a separate world I had to visit. It had moved into my world. It lived in my kitchen, in my bedroom, in my planner, in my phone, in my favorite playlists. I didn't have to schedule study time anymore. I was studying all the time, without even calling it that. But the most beautiful part was this. The more English became part of my daily rhythm, the less I feared it. It stopped being something I had to conquer and started being something I could dance with. There was no pressure to get everything right. There was just this ongoing conversation between me and the language. Quiet, steady, personal, and real. And yet, even with all this progress, I still felt nervous when it came to speaking with other people. I had built my English bubble through music, habits, self-talk, and routines, but it was still mostly a solo bubble. What I wanted now was connection. I wanted to talk to real people, to try this new voice I had built, to see if I could be understood, not just by myself, but by someone else. And so I took the next big step in my journey. I reached beyond my comfort zone. I started connecting with people, starting small, starting online, but slowly opening up to the world outside my routines. Because what good is a language if it stays locked inside your head? There was a moment when I realized I couldn't keep this English journey all to myself. I had already built small routines and filled my day with English, but something still felt incomplete. I was living in my own little bubble, comfortable, yes, but isolated. I could listen, read, and talk to myself, but I wasn't sure how my English actually sounded to other people. I didn't know how real conversations would feel. That scared me. I had done all this work, but I still hesitated to speak with anyone else. That's when it hit me. I needed people. I needed real connections to make English feel alive. So I made a decision. I was going to step outside my comfort zone and connect, even if it meant starting with strangers on the internet. It began quietly. I didn't jump on a video call right away or start chatting in English with people at the grocery store. No, it was smaller than that. I joined a Facebook group for English learners based in the US. The first week, I didn't post anything. I just watched. I saw people share their progress, their struggles, and their favorite American slang words. Some posted videos of themselves speaking English, asking for feedback. That was terrifying to me. I could never imagine recording myself and posting it for others to see. But at the same time, I felt something stirring inside. It wasn't jealousy. It was inspiration. I wanted that kind of courage. After a few days, I left my first comment. It was short. I just wrote, "You did a great job. I liked how you used the word actually in your story. I'm learning too. And that was it. But when the person replied with, "Thank you, keep going, you got this," it felt like someone had opened a window in a room I didn't even know was dark. That tiny exchange made me feel seen. My English wasn't invisible anymore. Someone noticed my words and answered back. It was the smallest thing, but it changed everything. After that, I became more active. I joined 2 language exchange apps where I could find people who wanted to learn my language, and in return, they would help me with English. I wasn't sure what to expect, and I definitely didn't expect to become friends with some of them. One woman named Rachel was from Ohio. She was trying to learn Spanish, and I offered to help her. In return, she helped me with English. We didn't make things complicated. We just texted back and forth, and sometimes we sent voice messages. She corrected my sentences, and I helped her with hers. But we didn't only talk about grammar. We talked about TV shows, our jobs, the weather, and what we had for lunch. It was real. It wasn't a class. It was a friendship. That's when I realized something powerful. You don't need a classroom to learn. You need people. The way Americans speak, the way they joke, the way they express emotion. You can't learn that from books alone. You have to feel it in real conversations, even if they're short, even if they're online, especially if they're online. I started using Zoom calls through some English conversation meetups. I found them on meetup.com and Reddit. At first, I turned off my camera and just listened, but over time, I got braver. I remember the first time I turned my camera on. It was a group from New York City doing a coffee chat over Zoom. Everyone was so casual, drinking coffee or tea, just talking about their week. I introduced myself and said, "Hi, I'm Eva. I'm learning English and I'm kind of nervous." And guess what? They smiled. Someone said, "Hey, Eva, you're doing great already. Welcome." My heart swelled. That was the beginning of me finding my voice, not just in private, but in public. These conversations weren't always perfect. Sometimes I froze. Sometimes I forgot a word. Sometimes I said something that made people laugh when I didn't mean to be funny, but none of that mattered. What mattered was that I kept showing up. I kept trying, and each time it got a little easier. My sentences came out faster. My vocabulary felt more natural. I stopped translating in my head. I started thinking in English because I needed to respond quickly. It wasn't about studying anymore. It was about living. One night, after a long day of work, I almost skipped a conversation meetup. I was tired and my head hurt, but I joined anyway, just to listen. That night, someone shared a story about a trip to Boston, and I found myself jumping in to ask a question about the Freedom Trail. I didn't even plan to speak, but there I was, talking, laughing, joining the group like I belonged. Because I did. Another time, I helped someone else who was just starting out. She was from South Korea and had just joined her first Zoom call. She said, "I'm scared. I don't want to mess up." And I smiled and said, "I used to feel the same way. You're not alone." That moment felt like a full circle. I had become the person I once needed. That's the beauty of connecting with people. You grow by giving too. I also joined online book clubs and watched American live streams. I didn't always speak, but I always listened. Listening to Americans talk in real time, not in slow learner voices, helped train my ears. I started noticing how they used phrases like, "you know what I mean," or "kind of like that." I picked up those patterns and started using them myself. Not because I memorized them, but because I heard them in real life again and again. And let's talk about social media. I followed American creators who made videos about everyday life, grocery hauls, home organizing, daily routines, morning coffee talks. I commented on their videos, and sometimes they responded. I wasn't doing it for followers, I was doing it for connection. Real Americans speaking real English in real situations. That's what I wanted. And I found it, right on my phone. One of my proudest moments came when someone messaged me privately and said, "I've been watching your comments in this group. Your English is really good. How did you learn?" I smiled and typed back, "I made it part of my life, one conversation at a time." That's when I knew I wasn't just learning English anymore. I was living in it. Even now, I don't go a day without connecting with someone in English. Whether it's a text, a voice note, a quick video chat, or even a meme, every little piece matters. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't need to be fluent. You just need to be present. Show up. Speak. Listen. Connect. That's how English becomes real. So, if you're reading this and thinking, "I'm too shy," or "I don't know enough yet," please believe me when I say you're ready now. You don't have to be perfect to make a friend. You don't need a fancy accent to be heard. You just need to be honest, kind, and willing to try. That's what Americans respect. That's what makes people listen. And as I kept building these connections, I realized something deeper. English wasn't just a skill I was learning. It was a bridge to people, to places, to parts of myself I never knew existed. Talking to others, even online, taught me that language isn't just about words. It's about courage. It's about community. It's about opening your mouth and letting your heart speak, even if it comes out a little messy. And that's how I knew I was ready for the next step. I had made English part of my thoughts, my routines, and my conversations. But now it was time for something even more powerful. I wanted to stop thinking about mistakes. I wanted to stop chasing perfection. I wanted to be myself in English. And that led me to the final step in my journey. After I started connecting with people online, something inside me shifted. English was no longer just a tool I was trying to learn. It started to feel like a part of me, a real part of my daily life. But it took me a while to understand this truth. The real breakthrough didn't come from speaking perfectly or knowing every grammar rule. It came when I stopped treating English like schoolwork and started treating it like my lifestyle. That's when everything changed. I used to think learning English meant sitting down with a notebook, writing out new vocabulary, repeating phrases from a textbook, and memorizing rules like I was still in a classroom. And don't get me wrong, those things helped in the beginning, but there came a point when they just weren't enough. I felt stuck, like I was circling the same small pond, never moving into the bigger lake of real-life English. I wanted something more natural, more alive. That's when I asked myself, what would it look like if English became part of how I lived? Not just something I practiced, but something I did every day without thinking. So I started living in English. Let me explain what that meant. Every small thing I did it in English. When I woke up and brushed my teeth, I said to myself, "Okay, time to get ready." When I made my morning coffee, I said, 1 scoop of sugar, 2 if I'm feeling lazy. I didn't say it for anyone else. I said it for me. English was becoming the voice in my head. The more I used it like this, the more it belonged to me. It wasn't foreign, it wasn't something I had to reach for. It just flowed. I also stopped making a big deal about studying. I no longer blocked out 90 minutes for English time. That made it feel like a chore, like exercise I didn't want to do. Instead, I scattered English into my daily life in little, natural ways. I read short articles while waiting for my groceries. I listened to podcasts while folding laundry. I watched American sitcoms while eating dinner. And I didn't force myself to understand everything. I didn't rewind every sentence I didn't get. I let the language wash over me like sunlight through a window. I trusted my brain to catch what it needed. This new mindset was powerful. It gave me permission to be relaxed. When I treated English like homework, I was always worried. Worried about grammar, pronunciation, sounding stupid, not knowing enough. But when I treated it like a lifestyle, I stopped worrying. I started enjoying. I laughed at jokes, even if I didn't catch every word. I talked to strangers at the store, even if my sentences weren't perfect. I wrote captions for my Instagram stories in English. I even started journaling in English, just for me. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. It was my life, in my voice. And because it was part of my lifestyle, I didn't burn out. That's one thing people don't talk about enough. Burnout. When you treat English like a subject you have to study, you get tired. You avoid it. You start making excuses. But when you build it into your real life, like brushing your teeth, drinking your coffee, checking the weather, it becomes automatic. It becomes part of your rhythm. You don't need to find time for English. It finds you. I also stopped comparing myself to other learners. That was a big one. When I saw someone speak fast and fluently, I used to feel jealous or discouraged. But after I made English part of my life, I started seeing my own progress. I realized something. This is my lifestyle. No one else lives exactly like me, so no one else's English journey will look like mine. And that's okay. I started focusing on my own habits, on what I was doing daily. And slowly, my confidence grew. Another shift happened when I started teaching my dog commands in English. It sounds silly, right? But I promise you, it worked. I would say, sit, stay, come here, good boy, let's go outside. I repeated those phrases every single day. And guess what? I was practicing English without even realizing it. It wasn't practice, it was life. And that's the point. When you do something in English because it fits into your day, not because it's on a list, that's when your brain relaxes. That's when you grow. I also stopped trying to sound perfectly American. Yes, I wanted to be understood. And yes, I wanted to reduce my accent, but I didn't want to erase myself. My voice mattered. My story mattered. The way I said things, my tone, my expressions, my style, those things made my English feel alive. I wasn't just copying someone else. I was building my own version of English. And honestly, that was powerful. People started telling me, "You speak so naturally." And I knew why. It wasn't because I used big words. It was because I sounded real. Living in English also meant choosing comfort over perfection. Sometimes I didn't know the perfect word, so I used a simpler one. Sometimes I messed up my tenses, so I laughed it off and moved on. That freedom, that ability to forgive myself, came only when I stopped treating English like a test and started treating it like a lifestyle. It wasn't about getting everything right. It was about being present. One of the most beautiful things that happened, I started dreaming in English. It didn't happen overnight, but after months of living my life in this language, talking to myself, listening to music, watching shows, texting friends, my brain started using English even while I slept. It was wild. I'd wake up and remember the conversations I had in my dream, and they were in English. Not because I forced it, but because I let English live in me. The truth is, when I stopped trying so hard to learn English and started simply being in English, everything got easier. I wasn't chasing fluency, I was living it. I wasn't scared of mistakes. I welcomed them. I laughed more. I tried more. I made English mine. Looking back, I realized this wasn't just a language journey. It was a life transformation. I became more confident, more open, more connected. I could talk to neighbors, understand the news, joke with coworkers, text friends without fear. And the best part? I didn't need to wait for a classroom. I didn't need a teacher. I didn't even need a perfect plan. All I needed was a choice to make English part of my lifestyle. And now, I want to tell you the last thing I learned, the most important thing, and that's what I'll share in the final part of my journey.